It's quickly beginning to feel like it's win or go home for the Pittsburgh Steelers in their 2025 season. This franchise finds themselves in a place they never thought they would this season. Chance for their head coach to be fired were hurled down from the home crowd in an embarrassing loss against the Buffalo Bills. And now they are hoping that they can suddenly shift course, get back on track. And who better to do it against than their AFC North rival, the Baltimore Ravens? They travel to M&T Bank Stadium for their first of two matchups against the Baltimore Ravens to close out the 2025 regular season. It's a game that has huge implications for the Pittsburgh Steelers season, of course. There's AFC North bragging rights and a divisional lead at stake here when the Steelers and Ravens go up against one another. But with this franchise in a questionable, mysterious place, there is more emphasis and importance on this AFC North divisional game than maybe in years past, and it could define what the Steelers are going to do moving forward beyond 2025. And that's why this win is important, not only to get a hold of the division, but to get this Steelers franchise back on track. Can they get that seventh win? In order to do so, I think there's three keys to victory here, and I want to talk about them a little bit here on my most recent edition of Puntori's Playbook. I'm Jacob Puntori. Thanks so much for jumping back in with me, my friends. How can the Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Baltimore Ravens? Look, this is not a matchup of Super Bowl contending teams as it has been in years past between these two heated rivals. Instead, we're looking at two underwhelming teams, two teams that have rosters littered with talent, but also littered with talent that has not achieved and has underwhelmed throughout the entire 2025 season. This is not the smash mouth, bang him down, drag him out, knock him down, punch you in the face, back and forth brawl that the Ravens and Steelers have typically gone to and gone through against one another. But this is going to be another classic. It's an AFC North bout. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I think there's three simple keys. The first one is it's what we've already talked about a ton on the All Steelers Talk podcast, and I'm sure every Steelers fan is already maybe quaking in their boots. Maybe they are excited about this, but it's what everybody is thinking about. It's on top of everybody's mind. Can this Pittsburgh Steelers defense stop the run? They were embarrassed at Acrisure Stadium by the Buffalo Bills in their most recent contest, allowing the most rushing yards ever in front of an Acrisure Stadium / Heinz Field crowd. It was an absolute stinker. How do they recover? How do they bounce back? Mike Tomlin said that they are committed to stopping the run this week, and we will see how they respond accordingly. But right now, they are giving up 117.7 rush yards per game. That is the 13th most in the entire league. That ranks 19th out of 32 teams. And that is in addition to the 365 total yards that this defense is allowing per contest, making them the fifth worst defense in terms of yards allowed this season. They have to find a way to turn it around. They have to find a way to do it without rookie defensive tackle and perhaps their best run stuffer, Derek Harmon. And you look at this Ravens offense, as I mentioned a minute or two ago, they're not the most impressive version of John Harbaugh's Ravens offense, but they can run the ball. In total, overall, they are not the most impressive offense. They are averaging 317 yards per game, which is 20th in the NFL. Their passing game is just as bad as the Pittsburgh Steelers. They rank 28th compared to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who rank 24th in passing yards per game this season. But when you look at the running game, when you look at the rushing game, it's impressive. Even with Derrick Henry not being the most elite version of King Henry, they are still managing 136.5 rushing yards per game, the fifth highest total in the league. It's also about 20 yards more than the Pittsburgh Steelers give up per game, coming off of a disastrous performance. Can they recover? Does Lamar Jackson's injury, he was banged up at practice, missed a day, has an ankle injury that he's recovering from, trying to nurse back to health in order to take on this contest? Does his mobility have any impact on the Steelers' ability to shut down this rushing game, or is it another week of this defense coming up short? They have to be big. They have to be better. In order to do so, they have to also create turnovers, which leads me to my second point, my second key to victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Despite this defense being so bad, despite this defense being maddening to all of us, despite this defense being way worse than any of us ever thought. The one area that they do excel, it's creating turnovers. This team is a top 5 turnover team in the entire NFL. They have a +8 turnover differential, which is the 5th best in the NFL in week 14. They have created 22 turnovers or takeaways. That is the second most generated in the NFL this year. And they've done that by creating 12 forced fumbles, the most in the NFL this year. And they've also created 10 interceptions, which is tied for the 10th most in the NFL this year. It's again, this is a defense that gives up a ton of yards. They are giving up some of the most passing yards per game. They are not a good run stuffing defense, but they do create splash plays, excuse me. And when those splash plays happen, good things often follow. And this Pittsburgh Steelers defense has historically created a lot of turnovers, a lot of splash plays against Lamar Jackson, against Snoop Huntley, if he is the quarterback who is in the game, against this Baltimore Ravens offense in general. It has to be a huge part of this game. It is really the only way that this defense can create momentum, can help lead this team to a victory. And this will, of course, be futile. It will be absolutely meaningless if the defense turns out a positive performance, if the offense does nothing with it in return. And this is why the Pittsburgh Steelers need their 41-year-old quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, to have his best game of the season, not just of recently. This has to be his best game in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform in 2025. Look, I know he's been banged up. He has a fractured non-throwing wrist. He's 41 years old. There is a part of me that has just kind of come to this conclusion that everything that Aaron Rodgers had left in the tank kind of went out the door in week 1 against the New York Jets. He had this incredible performance. He throws for 22 completions on 30 attempts, puts up just under 250 yards, throws 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, gets sacked a couple of times, but you're like, wow, I think Aaron Rodgers really turned back the clock here. And then you go out and you look at what he's done the rest of the season. It's really been just as mediocre and middling as the rest of the offensive performance. And over the last 5 games, it's been just as bad. He has not thrown for more than 220 passing yards in his last 5 appearances. That does include the game that he left early with a fractured wrist. But that being said, this is a version of Aaron Rodgers that is really struggling to escape the pocket, is really struggling to find his checkdowns, is really struggling to get rid of the ball to receivers whenever the pocket does collapse. And we're seeing a version of Aaron Rodgers that looks old, that looks kind of tired, that looks like he is very far removed from the 4-time MVP version of himself and the version of himself that could single-handedly lead a team to victory. But that all being said, he is still performing like a strong quarterback when it's all said and done. He has a 65.2% completion rate. He has thrown for 19 touchdowns and versus 7 interceptions. He's been sacked 20 times, and that is continuing to be a problem. Again, that is an issue of his lack of mobility combined with inconsistent offensive line play, but it has to be improved against this Baltimore Ravens defense, which is not the most imposing similarly to their offense, but they can find ways to get after you. And the Pittsburgh Steelers know, and they're surely vulnerable to these types of defenses. So can Aaron Rodgers put together a classic Rodgers game? Can he turn back the clock one more time? Can we see a vintage version of the 4-time MVP, the former Super Bowl winner, the future Hall of Famer? Or are we going to look at this geriatric roster once again that's headlined by aging stars on both sides of the field as they lose in disappointing fashion? I really don't want to talk about that again. You know, I know most people think that I love being pessimistic. I don't. I just come by it honestly, and I really do. And these Pittsburgh Steelers give me plenty to be pessimistic about, but you can turn it around, boys. We really can. All you got to do is let Aaron Rodgers lead the way offensively. You got to win the turnover battle, create some splash plays on defense, and you got to find a way to not get embarrassed when it comes to stopping the run. If you do those 3 things, you just might take a lead in the AFC North. We'd all love to see it. I hope they can pull it out. And I think that's going to do it for me on this week's final episode of the week of Puntori's Playbook. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and for hanging in here with me. It's been such a blast. We just surpassed 55,000 subscribers on YouTube recently, and that's thanks to all of your love. So keep it coming. If you could drop a like, if you want to subscribe, go for it. We love it. You can check out the flagship program of All Steelers Talk on YouTube every day of the week in the meantime. But you can find that on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast, and you can check out our written work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. I'll be back next week with some more Puntori's Playbook. We'll be back with some All Steelers Talk episodes to do our predictions for the game. But until I see you later next week, whatever it is, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.